And currently, there's no legal requirement to provide any information while using this prepaid cards. The law enforcement agency find it difficult to track down or to identify the perpetrators, which pose great challenges on detecting such crimes. The Undersecretary for Security will elaborate. Regulating prepaid card of the importance and the law difficulty in law enforcement, and also the urgency in bringing real name registration. And its real name system is implemented in three third countries, including our well-familiar registration like Japan, Korea, Europeans, and Southeast Asian countries have implemented real name registration system. When you buy a SIM card there, you need to fill in certain information. We propose a arrangement that's similar to other countries and is also underway in over 150 jurisdictions. The government hopes to set up a new rule through the telecom ordinance in establishing a real name registration program. The telecom operators can register, collect, and keep user particulars. The real name registration system will cover a local SIM card issued by local providers and used in Hong Kong. Currently, for the SIM service plan, the telecom operator already have the user details. Therefore, this real name registration system would target more the prepaid SIM cards. The main characteristic of the real name registration system: these prepaid SIM users must provide their birthday, their name, and also the information on their identity document. A quicker way, we provide a copy of their identity document. If a user is a company or is corporate, they need to provide a business registration as well as a designated authorized representative or a responsible person. For a user under 16, by time registration, they must be endorsed by an appropriate adult who could be parents, relatives, or guardians, to prevent that the young people will be exploited by criminals. For each user, they can register no more than 3 prepaid cards to each telecom operator. We don't want to create a loophole by allowing too many SIM cards, and which would be exploited by criminals to engage in illicit activities. Well, this is 3 may appear to be a small number, as Hong Kong have over 30 telecom providers. So we're limiting the number of SIM cards for each provider to 3. I believe that this number is sufficient to meet the basic needs. In our proposal, we suggest that the telecom operator is responsible for checking, clarifying, and verifying user particulars, and under sufficient grounds, if the telecom suspect of providing false information, that they can suspend the SIM cards, and the operators are required to keep the registration particulars for at least 12 months after a SIM card is deregistered. This information affords a lot of protection, as this particular are only stored by the telecom operators. Unless under urgent or emergency situation, the law enforcement agency would apply to access such information, they will need to apply a warrant issued by magistrates. And this information only limited to registration and not including the phone records and so on. And at the end of the consultation period and after reviewing the public feedback, we will submit amendment bill to Let's Go for scrutiny. We'll help to implement the real name registration by a phased approach. The first 120 days, the telecom operator will establish a system on the collection and storage of user particulars, and with reference to overseas will allow 240 days for registration before making the system up and running. By then, all the SIM cards, whether for under prepaid or a SIM service plan, will be covered by this real name registration program. Next, I'll invite Mr. Sonny Al to talk about the enforcement.
多謝邱局長。各位
Thank you. Friends of the media, good afternoon. Now, prepaid SIM cards do not have to be registered using real names. So, perpetrators are using PPS to commit crimes. And PPS has been used in different deception cases. The government and the law enforcement agencies have done a lot of publicity in recent years to remind people to remain vigilant. But then there has been a marked increase in various type of deception cases. In the past 3 years, the number of telephone deception cases increased from 615 in 2018 to 1,108 cases. In the first 11 months of last year, the money involved was 563 million. Guess who I am? Telephone deception cases. Let's take that for an example. The number was 262 in 2018, and in the first 11 months of 2020, the case is 470. The money involved is 13.52 million in 2018. The figure has risen to 24 million in the first 11 months of last year. In such a guess who I am deception cases, there are many cases involving PPS, and actually 90% of them have used a PPS. There are different other types of deceptions, faking government officials, investment deceptions, deception relating to job seekers. The number has been rising ever. The perpetrators are casting their net very wide in finding the victims. They call up the victims and try to gain their trust and then deceive them. Now, for such PPS, they have become a tool for the perpetrators to commit crimes. And they can change the PPS all the time to avoid being caught by the police. We don't have the real identity of the culprits, and such PPS have increased the difficulties for the police to detect crimes. And it's difficult to find out the identity of the culprits, and it's difficult to bring them to justice. And also, some perpetrators are using PPS to commit a lot of serious and organized crimes. Say, for example, human trafficking, drug trafficking, burglaries, technology crimes, smuggling, and also deception cases related to immigration matters. These PPS are also being used to detonate homemade bombs remotely, putting our community at risk. Such PPS cards would conceal the identity of the perpetrators, and they could not be easily identified. Actually, the masterminds behind the crimes are actually at bay. To prevent the perpetrators using PPS cards to commit crimes, we would like to implement the real name registration program as soon as possible so that the perpetrators cannot use such PPS cards anymore, so that we can better protect the property and lives of Hong Kong people. So the floor is open to the media. Please ask no more than 3 questions. Identify yourself and your media organization before you ask a question. Commercial radio. You said that one of the reasons for legislation is to crack down on crimes. You said that there were some 11 million PPS cards. Some of them are really put to good and proper use, and many of the store operators are engaging in such PPS business. Will the livelihood of these operators be affected? Now, you talk about serious crimes. Is your decision related to the anti-extradition saga? Have you got any sort of national security concerns? You want to align yourself with the mainland and Macau? So I'll try to first answer the question, and then the 2 other colleagues can supplement if necessary. For the real name registration program, we would like to align the PPS with the SSPs in terms of the users' information that we gather. So we would be using the copy of the identity card for registration. So the use of the PPS card will not be affected at all. In terms of the use of the PPS card, the users can use them as long as they register their personal particulars. But then we will be watching out for the implementation closely, and maybe we'll have to understand more about what will happen to the telecom operators and the sellers, so that we can minimize the impact on the users as much as possible. We'll try to understand that. Now, the program seeks to combat crimes of all sorts. This can help the police and other law enforcement agencies in combating crimes. This is our target. Let me supplement. In terms of cracking down on crimes, I said about, I referred to some telephone deception cases. 90% of the SIM cards involved in such deception cases are PPS cards. And for online deception cases, 89% of them have to do with the use of PPS cards. And then there are other deception cases involving PPS cards. 82% of such cases are related to the use of PPS cards. So for most of the deception cases, PPS cards have been used. Let me give you 2 examples for your reference. Maybe you have heard about reports of these cases. In November last year, there was a case of money laundering. Some SIM cards were used in opening bank accounts in virtual banks, and some financial technology was used in carrying out gambling online, and some 240 SIM cards were seized by the police in its operation, and 29 people were arrested. You can see that these PPS cards were used in great quantity by perpetrators in committing crimes. Another example is about an online buying syndicate. 6 people were arrested, 15 PPS cards were seized, and they were used to liaise with the victims of the case. Apart from these deception cases, I also mentioned that there were serious crimes like burglaries, homicides, serious wounding, and assaults, and so on. 70% of these cases were related to the use of such PPS cards. And then, apart from serious crimes, maybe you would not notice these, but these affect a lot of people. For illegal debt collection, while many people were being chased up by debt collection agencies, and which also use these PPS cards. So every year there are some 9,000 such cases, and the number is ever rising. And many of these people came with a triad background. They did not only call up the debtor, but they also call up the family members, their work colleagues, and so on. So they tried to arrest the debtor as much as they could, and some even put their personal particulars online, posing pressure on the debtors. The detection rate of such cases is rather low, but a lot of people were being harassed. And these people don't know where to turn to for help. So we're talking about tens of thousands of people being arrested every year. Apart from illegal debt collection activities, many vice syndicates were also using PPS cards to help them with their work. And many masterminds of such syndicates did not surface at all, and they used such PPS cards to control, say, the prostitutes from the mainland, the illegal immigrants. All these arrangements were made via the use of PPS cards, and these cards were used to conceal the identity of the masterminds. Apart from these two cases, I believe that Hong Kong people are very concerned about animal cruelty. A lot of the culprits took videos of animal cruelty and then put them online, and they felt happy about it. These short videos were put online also via such PPS cards, and we've not been effectively cracking down on such cases as a result. So the detection rate of such animal cruelty cases is not high either. And there was a major money laundering case recently involved large sums of money. Last month, we're talking about, there was a case involving $6.3 billion, and 14 people from Belgium and the mainland were arrested. They used fake identity documents and company documents and PPS cards to open 14 bank accounts, and they engaged in money laundering activities. So a total of $6.3 billion was involved in the case. Well, let me say something more about the homemade bombs. Well, overseas, many terrorist attacks were launched, and PPS cards were used to detonate such bombs. For law enforcement officers involved in such cracking down on such terrorist attacks, in 2014, 4 trains exploded in Madrid, and 10 bombs were detonated using such PPS cards. In 2010, in Britain, in Leicester, there was a similar case. In the Boston Marathon bomb attacks, at the finish line, 2 bombs were detonated using such tactics. And nearer to Hong Kong, in 2019 and 2020, there were 4 similar cases whereby PPS cards were deployed to detonate homemade bombs. They took place in Wan Chai, Mong Kok, Tin Shui Wai, and Kwai Chung. There was also the problem of bomb threats.
我擺咗喺站。
Let's say someone claimed to have planted a bomb somewhere, that we need to evacuate that place. Taking MTR station will be difficult. A cinema, well, it will really be a killjoy, and also would cause flight delays in airports. The anonymous nature of the prepaid SIM cards create inconveniences in many aspects of daily lives, and also able to commit a lot of crimes, and also threaten our lives and property. On the third row, the lady in beige. HKO1. That in the proposal, you will limit the number of prepaid SIM cards to 3 per person, and you claim that 3 for each operator. So maybe there's some operator may be very popular with SIM cards, and what would happen to them? And some of the companies may issue prepaid SIM cards for their employees, but limiting the number to 3 will have a lot of impact on whether it's reasonable. As for the place of replacement, truly we have 11.7 million prepaid cards in only to register within 360 days. Is it feasible? So maybe on a daily basis you need to replace over 30,000 of them. Third question, on crime. And how effective is using SIM cards to combat crime? With the foreign SIM cards under regulation as well. If there are no regulation of foreign SIM cards, then people will use foreign cards to commit telecom deception and guess who scams. How effective is this proposed program? And also, without a court warrant, the law enforcement agency can access user particulars. I suppose you've asked enough questions of, for example, for unlawful assembly or breaching of national security laws, and which would be the case. For the second and third question, I'll pass on the Undersecretary for Security. And for the number of SIM cards allowed, we take in view of actual circumstances and similar rule in other countries. Of the 155 jurisdictions, this limit is shared by those places. And some places even limit to 3 SIM cards per person, some limit to 5 per person. We understand that Hong Kong people will need to use more SIM cards. While there are about in our 3-2 registration system, there are 30 telecom operators providing SIM cards. Let's say 3 per provider. If anyone has such a need, they could have close to as 90 SIM cards. For companies, they can use a SIM service plans, or each company have different arrangements, or sometimes they will ask the staff to register their own number and reimburse them, which is similar to current arrangements. Right now, Hong Kong have plenty of SIM service plans. We have about 9 million SIM service users. We need to take into account of actual circumstances and the feedback during the consultation exercise. For the implementation details in our proposal, they would divide into 2 phases. After the law takes effect, the first thing that the operator will need to establish a system for registration. This is not difficult technically. That could be handled by artificial intelligence. First, they need to build up a database and open for registration. We hope that we don't need to recall the sold SIM cards. Instead, they need to do a simple registration when activating the card. I wonder if Mr. Leung can supplement. We're allowing 120 days for the sector to prepare, and also 240 days in allowing the members of the public to register during this period, which shall closely monitor the registration. We also arrange our service provider to issue SMS regularly to remind them to register, so that their card will not be deregistered after the deadline. On the law enforcement aspect, I have something to add. Just now, I mainly focused on the police force. There are 3 other agencies: the Customs Excise, and Immigration, and the ICAC. The ICAC, the customs investigation is also hampered, for example, in drug parcels or manipulating young people for drug trafficking, and also cigarette smuggling, and so on. And also, while investigating people smuggling syndicate or arranging illegal immigrants or bogus marriages, the investigation is also hampered. The ICAC investigating corruption or imposing and the ICAC officers, or investigating election fraud or unlawful acts, the work is also hampered. For overseas SIM cards, according to department requirement, that the SIM cards activated in Hong Kong will be regulated. And for the case of foreign SIM cards are not affected, it's not something we plan to regulate. Once this registration system is underway, most of the anonymous prepaid SIM cards will be regulated, which will be of great help to us. If anyone wants to make use of overseas SIM card, first, there will cost more, and also the cost of committing such crimes. And this doesn't mean that we don't have any clues to pick up. Well, in the world of globalization, cracking down on crime is a common wish of all jurisdictions and countries. We have 155 countries, with about 3/4 of the country already have the system. We simply share the common responsibility of cracking down on crime. I believe that other countries will gradually join the ranks in order to crack down on this effectively. On the mainland of Macau and Taiwan already have the registration system in place, and so do a lot of European countries. Singapore, Australia, Korea, and Japan also have a registration system. If this system runs well, it will show to other economies that we are a responsible jurisdiction. Let's take an English question.
From South China Morning Post. The first question, could you please further elaborate on urgent or emergency situations when warrants are not needed? Can you give some examples? Are those situations simply defined by the law enforcement agencies? So if that's so, how to prevent the abuse of power? The second question, many of the previous public consultations last for 3 months. Why is this consultation so short? Is the urgency related to the imposition of the national security law? The last question, a similar system in mainland China also required citizens to have facial scans before purchasing new SIM cards. Will Hong Kong follow this move too? Thank you.
Awesome. Maybe let me answer the first question. About the emergency situation, and in the consultation document, we have put down for the law enforcement agency to obtain the register information from the service provider. We have to remember the register information is only the name, the ID card number, and also your date of birth, nothing else. It is as simple as that. In order for the law enforcement agency to obtain this information from the service provider, normally the agency has to obtain a search warrant from a magistrate. Only in the situation when obtaining the warrant will prevent either the apprehension of the culprit, destruction of the property, or the commission of the offense is imminent. then we will resort to a quicker method. A quicker method is for a superintendent equivalent in the police force or in immigration and the custom or the ICAC to authorize the obtaining of the information from the service provider. When the superintendent giving this authority, he has to abide to the rules and regulations of the data privacy ordinance, and there will be internal guidelines to make sure that the exercise of the authority, balancing the data privacy, communication freedom, and also the need for the prevention and detection of crime. For the emergency situation, it's very difficult really for me to outline every aspect of the emergency situation. I think the common sense will dictate. In addition to emergency situation, we have put it down that it has to be a serious offense. For serious offense, we have put it down that it has to be an offense sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. Why we put this down, we have made reference to the Interception and Co-Surveillance Ordinance, Chapter 589. That is a definition of serious offense, and we make reference to that one.
Yeah, regarding your two other questions, I think the consultation, well, the purpose of this consultation is in fact to ask mainly operators who are involved in the trade and also members of the public whether this proposal is possible. And in fact, in the scheme, we are in fact asking for very simple and straightforward information. For the service provider, what they need is in fact sort of build a system so that they can have a depository of such information and if need be, allow law enforcement agency to obtain them. And for the users, at the end of the day, what they need to do is in fact provide information no more than what they have been doing in the sort of service plan SIM card. So, but of course, like any other consultation, we want to hear from the public, and if there is a need to extend this, we'll certainly consider. As regards your last question about facial information or any biometric information, no, we have no intention to do so. And as we have said, information required will be very, very simple. Information from the ID card, basically name and date of birth, and which has been the case for, in fact, many sort of other services that one is providing in a wide range of retail or commercial activities. Yeah, thank you.
右手邊第三行灰色衫褲嘅男士。
The gentleman here, I'm from Apple Daily. The government is consulting on this proposed registration program. Does it mean that you would go ahead no matter what? Now, Mr. Sunny Ao has said so much about the merits of the program, and if the public rejects it, does it mean that the government will give up the idea? And then you talked about the mainland and Macau implementing this real name registration program, and earlier, China has adopted the facial recognition technology for the telecom services. Will the Secretary undertake that you would never resort to facial recognition when people have to apply for telecom services? We don't have a preconceived stance. So we will be looking at the views received during the consultation. We don't have any plan to gather more information beyond what is in the ID card. And actually, we are gathering less information than that required for buying a SIM SSP card. Well, we don't have any plan to go beyond what is being proposed. The gentleman there, I'm from RTHK. The consultation period is around 1 month. I mean, does this timetable, do you mean this timetable to tie in with the electrical elections? And then we talk about the certain urgent emergency situations. What do you mean by those? So who in the law enforcement agencies will make the decision on whether it's an urgent or an emergency situation? Are you saying that anything related to the national security law will be considered as urgent situation? And then you quoted many examples on telephone deception cases, but actually many cases involve calls from overseas, and then also calls from PPS cards. So you are tightening your regulation on PPS cards. How effective it will be in combating crimes? As some peers asked whether this proposal is really to enhance monitoring on SIM cards users and members of the public. Now, I've responded to the question about consultation period. I will not repeat it. I think the proposal is simple. It aims mainly to combat crimes. So the SP colleague has also clearly explained that we have run into problems in enforcing the law, so hence the proposal. Now, on the definition of urgent or emergency, I think we'll go by common sense in making the decision. When you're talking about saving a life or a serious crime is about to be committed, or there will be cases involving smuggling, human trafficking, blackmailing, and so on. And these are serious crimes, and we will consider them as emergency situations. And then for online deception cases, well, some of the calls actually are from Hong Kong and not just overseas. And there are also other cases like homicide, wounding cases. PPS cards have been involved all the time. So if we can detect more cases, the better it will be.
即係頭先可能出咗呢個。
So after this program is rolled out, the netizen reaction may claim that it will step up the monitoring of the public or tracking down the public. And how do you address their concerns? Well, looking at the proposals, if you're on a monthly plan, you already provide your personal particulars, including your address, to the providers. If you use this prepaid SIM cards, we are just simply asking you to provide your personal particulars, and they're actually stored in the telecom providers, and just where necessary. And just like the Undersecretary have said, well, for any law enforcement needs, then the authorities were able to access them. Well, there's basically not much difference compared to the current approach. As we explained earlier, even though most people are using these prepaid SIM cards legitimately, and there are quite a number of people, for example, as you see that the proportion of crimes, about 80 or 90% of these cases using the prepaid SIM cards as a way to commit crime. If we're able to eliminate this law enforcement obstacle, for most of the law-abiding citizens, there would no impact on them. This would actually make us feel safer. You simply provide your personal particulars to the telecom provider. Speaking on the mic. For the examples I cited, I could not give an exhaustive list. Well, but maybe use common sense. For example, life-saving situations, serious crime, for example, illegal detention, human trafficking, or where peoples may be hurt. Okay, we may take another 2 questions. Cable news. The telephone deceptions calls are not made in Hong Kong. Would this registration system able to combat this type of crime effectively? And according to the paper, the telecom provider would need to set up their own system. Would the government request a direct connection to this databases? I already answered the first question. Currently, these prepaid SIM cards sold in Hong Kong, close to 12 million of those, are anonymous. And the problem in enforcement and also the loophole are worthy of our concern. We don't have any plans. We're not linked the telecom provider database to us. They need to follow the law in establishing a database, whereas the law enforcement agency have the need to prevent or combat crime. They would, in general situation, need to apply for a court warrant. Last question.
English News. First question to Mr. Edward Yao. Why was the decision made in this period of time? Was it in light of the social unrest happened in 2019, where many anonymous netizens made unfavorable comments towards the government? And second question to Mr. Au. We can see that law enforcement bodies are able to trace back the identities of suspects who have committed crime, even their name has not been registered at the current stage. So why there's still an urgent need to impose more control in buying SIM cards? And the last question is regarding, do the authority got the timeline of when will the proposed legislation submitted to LegCo and enacted? Thank you.
Okay, I'll answer the first and the last one. I think the first one is very simple. Why? The reason is to combat and prevent crime, as very detailedly outlined by the Undersecretary. And regarding the timeline, I think the present stage is for us to introduce this proposal, and through the consultation to ask feedback and views or any concern or difficulties identified by people in the trade as well as the community at large. We'll we'll definitely look at what feedback we have got and then proceed with the legislation. And as usual, this would require legislation to be made through Legislative Council. Thank you.
I think I have outlined earlier on about the crimes, the incident that we have to deal with in facing this unregistered SIM card. In addition to scams, deceptions, there are also other very serious crimes. Unlawful collection of debt, prostitution racket, money laundering, also explosive. In addition to police, also the custom, immigration, and ICAC also face the same kind of difficulties when they have to handle unregistered SIM card. You are right, there were cases arrested even for unregistered SIM card, but for these cases, the detection rate is very, very low. Some as low as only 10 to 20%, some even down to single digit. As compared to other normal average crime, we have a detection rate for 45 to 50%. So when we compare the detection rate of these various categories, we believe that more have to be done to protect the innocent, to protect the elderly, and protect the weak and vulnerable. Thank you.
好，記者會喺度結束，唔該晒。
Today press conference. Thank you for coming.